Bienvenidos.
Bienvenido.
Bienvenidos.
Gracias.
Good afternoon. My name is Carmen Pacheco, and I am the president of the Puerto Rican Bar Association, which is here in New York. We have a very exciting program for this afternoon. I'll have each of our panelists identify themselves and introduce themselves before we begin. We'll start with Tony Suárez.
I am Tony Suárez from Orlando, Florida, originally a New Yorker, but I've been down in Florida now for 26 years, and I assumed the presidency of the Puerto Rican Bar Association, now entering its 17th year of existence in Florida. We started mostly in Miami, but since the growth of the Puerto Rican community has been largely in Orlando, we are statewide bar, but we have more members active in Central Florida. And I hope to be able to, in today's discussion, talk about what we're doing in Florida to assist Puerto Rico and participate in la diáspora y la participación de nosotros en ayudar la isla de Puerto Rico.
Hi, I'm Juan Cartagena. I'm the President General Counsel of LatinoJustice PRLDEF, formerly called the Puerto Rican Legal Defense and Education Fund. For the purposes of this panel, I've been a member of multiple bar associations, but I was for 7 years. I was the General Counsel to the Hispanic Bar Association of New Jersey. Our office is headquartered todavía right here in New York City, and we have an office and have had an office for several years in Orlando.
I'm Roseni Plaza. I am the Executive Director of the National Employment Lawyers Association of New York. It is a national bar association as well, exclusively for employment lawyers. And I'm here mostly to talk about coalition building and how bar associations could help the people of Puerto Rico and the diaspora as well.
And now, the Puerto Rican Bar Association of New York was established in 1957, but it has its roots way back in 1934, when a group of Puerto Rican lawyers were in a community organizing. But the formality of our organization in the United States, in New York, was in 1957, which makes the Puerto Rican Bar of New York one of the oldest minority bars across the country. Now, generationally, when you look at the bar associations and the Puerto Rican involvement and contribution, we should look at the island of Puerto Rico, since we're talking about the diaspora. In the island of Puerto Rico, the first of the United States, or of the Americas of North, was established in 1841. That is el Colegio de Abogados de Puerto Rico. The Puerto Rican Bar Association of Puerto Rico was the first bar association anywhere throughout the United States, and before they became part of the United States, when they were part of Spain. So here you have history, beginning and ending now with Puerto Rico. We have a long and beautiful history, and diaspora, and also the natives of Puerto Rico as attorneys. So the first thing I want to start with here, and in fact, let me just give you one other point. In 1878, many decades later, the American Bar Association had the light bulb to say, oh, we're going to organize. How many decades later was that? After the bright bulb came from la isla de Puerto Rico, la isla de encanto. So let's start with this. What is the importance, do you believe, of having organized bar associations being led by Puerto Ricans and other Latinos, but mostly Puerto Ricans? Anyone?
Sure. You have to recognize that when it comes to the profession of attorneys in the United States, and I'm only speaking now with respect to the 50 states, the percentage of Puerto Rican attorneys is minuscule. In fact, when you put all of them together, every Latino who's admitted to the bar and practicing law in the United States is under 4% of the population, 4% of all the attorneys in the United States. We have seen data that demonstrates that when you compare the proportion of Latinas and Latinos writ large in other professions, nursing, engineering, surgeons. There's a higher proportion of Latinas and Latinos in those professions than there are for lawyers. So you're really looking at a shrinking and a very, very tight market in general. So when it comes to these opportunities to collectively get together in association, whether it's a Puerto Rican association or whether it's an Hispanic association, whether it's Latina association, a lot of the power in that room is disproportionate with respect to the number of people practicing. Secondly, I think that the issue that you're raising, Carmen, is to what extent are associations that are run and led by Puerto Rican attorneys are important for the Puerto Rican diaspora? The answer to that is pretty obvious. The answer to that is very much yes. I won't tell you what bar associations do because you have an incredible array of current talent here. But just alone, and just thinking about one of the simple things that they do consistently very, very well is to advocate for diversifying the bench, diversifying the bar, more attorneys in general, and diversifying executive appointments. Just by that alone, bar associations play a critical pipeline role in making sure that their members are elevated and brought to those positions. And when it's led by a Puerto Rican attorney, even better.
I can add to this is that I have a great unique opportunity to view the Puerto Rican community because now I'm entering my 40th year of practicing law, having graduated. And I was, of course, a New Yorker, and I had the great honor of being president of the Puerto Rican Bar Association in 1988 here in New York. And what I've always been, and what was important to the Bar Association is note that Puerto Rican Bar was incorporated in 1957. That's before, Brown versus Board of, no, excuse, not before Brown, but immediately after it. And part of the civil rights movement because it was understood that the solutions, there were problems, and the solutions had to be led by who? I believe the lawyers who are part of the pillars of our society because they interact with one of the biggest pillars, which is the courts, have that big role. And being part of the American Bar Association doesn't give us the opportunity to exert that influence rather than starting our own bar associations that have its own emphasis. Now, just like Juan and the Puerto Rican Legal Defense Fund had that pressure to modify its name, we too had that problem in New York and of course in Florida to change ourselves to the Hispanic bar. And I felt that it was important to keep the name of Puerto Rico because everything, the Hispanic community in general has other interests, other points of critical mass for them, as opposed to Puerto Rico. And the reason we have a Puerto Rican Bar Association, as I perceive it, is to concentrate and focus ourselves on the problems in Puerto Rico back from 1957 to now, and to the Puerto Rican community that finds itself in the migration mode, and it still needs services by our community. So it's important that this bar association, or these bar associations that continue to call themselves Puerto Rican Bar Associations, concentrate on the civil rights aspect of Puerto Ricans and as I perceive it, and I'm sure we'll discuss it during this hour, the civil rights problems that come from being in a second-class status as American citizens. So that's the emphasis I think that we play to both educate the American community of what the situation is in Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans in our particular states, and the problems of Puerto Rico as it is caused by the constitutional crisis in which Puerto Rico finds itself.
Now, Roseni, when you're hearing about this issue of civil rights, we are confronted on the island with issues concerning employment, pensions. A spot-on issue is the El San Juan Hotel. Do you think you can talk a little bit about that, being a Puerto Rican who's leading an institution like your own?
Yes. So, as Carmen said, I am a very small minority within my organization. My organization is pretty much very sorry. My organization is not as diverse, and of course, we're specialized in something completely different, which is employment-related matters, which is what Carmen alluded to now. Our organization, being a national organization, is paying attention to what's happening in Puerto Rico, and we are now starting to come together to discuss how is it that these policies and these situations in Puerto Rico are going to affect the people here in the United States. And with our attorneys being employment lawyers, and they have the constituents of Puerto Ricans, they definitely work with Puerto Ricans, and now they're to the point where they want to really understand our story, our situation. So it's very different from the perspective of Anthony and Juan, where it's focused by Puerto Ricans. I am probably one of maybe 10, and I may be a little bit loose with that number. I have a membership of about 400, and we really don't have enough Puerto Ricans in our organization. And we are really making a big commitment, especially this year, 2017, to diversify, not just within our membership, but also within our board, and with, trying to build coalitions with other bar associations like this one. And trying to go back to your question about how do they feel about what's happening in Puerto Rico and what are the employment-related issues, it's a little complicated. But what I do want to say is that there is now a discussion that was not there even about 4 years ago when I started with this organization. And I'm excited to say that now I'm getting some members, non-Puerto Ricans, that are interested in what's going on in Puerto Rico, on how they can become effective. And we do actually have a very small, maybe a handful of employment lawyers in Puerto Rico that are associated with the National Employment Lawyers Association. So we're on our way to building some kind of coalitions, and it's very important for me to build this coalition with members of the Puerto Rican Bar Association like Carmen and other people here as well. So.
Now, talking about the breadth of having others listen, I believe that PRLDEF, during the issues of the Voting Rights Act, that they were in action on behalf of the Puerto Rican community when they were talking about issues of English literacy. I'll ask Mr. Cartagena to address that, and then how have we progressed from then to now, and the impact that attorneys and bar associations have when you're dealing with issues concerning our community, and how our community as Puerto Ricans help other nationalities.
Sure. Some of the earliest cases that were filed by my office in the 1970s addressed the legal question of citizenship and voting for populations that are migrating out of the island and mostly into New York at that time. And the quick answer was that in order to effectuate true access to the voting booth, it has to be in a language they can understand. You might think that's a pretty simple statement to make, but it was never made by a court, nor was it ever made by Congress in 1972. It was made in a different way by Congress in part in 1965 in the Voting Rights Act. But we're looking at populations and legal pronouncements by the courts that took a while to fully develop with respect to what we call language minority citizens. That said, the Voting Rights Act of 65 had a very unique provision of it, which, if you remember the Voting Rights Act of 65 at all, you might remember how it was emanating out of the experience and the abuse of African American voters, and the Edmund Pettus Bridge and Selma Montgomery, and the whole question about forcing Johnson to sign the Voting Rights Act. You would think that the Voting Rights Act, as it was portrayed in the media, was only black and white. Well, that's wrong. Section 4E of the Voting Rights Act permitted Puerto Ricans who were educated in Puerto Rico, who achieved at least a 6th grade education, not to be stopped from voting in the U.S. just because it didn't master English. That provision was used as the basis for a lot of lawsuits that were filed by the Puerto Rican Defense Fund to then open up bilingual voting systems. Then you fast forward from 65 to 75, Congress is now considering whether they should pass the bilingual voting amendments to the Voting Rights Act to expand access to the voting booth and registration to Spanish language citizens, Native American citizens, and Asian American citizens. And when they were considering that in 675, 10 years after the original act that was only for Puerto Ricans, and after a body of case law that was developed by my office way back in the 70s, you had comments from the floor of Congress saying bilingual voting systems cannot be radical in the United States because they have been doing it in New York for all this time. So the Puerto Rican experience of 65 to 75 opened up the door to allow bilingual voting systems to operate for Spanish American voters throughout the US, which at that time, 65, even today, is mostly Mexicanos. So Mexicans were able to enjoy access to the ballot in a language they can understand, Native Americans, Asian Americans, because of a very unique provision in 65. So to get to Carmen's question, that's a classic example of a Puerto Rican experience opening the door widely to other language minority citizens to actively involve themselves in voting booth. Now the question is, where are we and what does that really mean? I mean, that's probably a broader discussion I can want to hear from you as well. You know, you have obviously you have an increased number of people who are voting, increased number who are registered. You have elected officials who are Puerto Rican, Puerto Rican all over the country, and you have semblances of almost parity. That is, percentage of people in your jurisdiction versus percentage of Puerto Ricans elected. You don't have parity anywhere, really, in my opinion. But you get close to it in places like the Bronx, or places like New Haven, and Connecticut, and other small towns in Connecticut. The question that begs is whether, and this is a big broad question I don't think we have time for in this topic today, the question that begs is, are you better represented by a Puerto Rican than you are by somebody else who otherwise represents your interests?
Well, I don't beg it, I say yes. So, one moment. Then we'll get into questions.
No, I don't have a question. I just want to just thank you guys because in 1965, maybe 67, one of the elections, my father was able to vote because he didn't read English and he registered, the language. My mother, on the other hand, could read English, so she was already voting.
Good.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
So much.
Thank you.
In furtherance of the Puerto Rican experience, we have created a pipeline. And because of that pipeline, we have, for example, Judge Guillermo Vidal Santa Eda, that was part of that whole Voting Rights Act mission. And people who stood up for the right causes, not for themselves, but for community at large, and then other communities from which it spilled out. So when we look at a pipeline, we look at bar associations because they cultivate that. So, Mr. Suárez, could you talk about that issue? And the importance of a bar association in creating the pipeline.
Well, I'm going to take a little bit, if you permit me, because I put a PowerPoint presentation together to show a little bit about what we do. All right? I think that the bar associations have, I indicated to you that the bar associations have this role, because what are we but a society, despite what Mr. Trump says? We have a society that's ruled by law. And if you have law, then who are the ones proposing? That's the lawyers. I think that lawyers have a great role. To me, it's like it's my mission. It's my role. I would not want to do anything but be a lawyer because all the wonderful things that the law allows us to do. But that also requires us to be leaders. Now, a lot of lawyers will get bad raps because, of course, all they're interested in is making money and making more money and making more money into who knows. And then some of them are bad who defend really on terrible positions. But the vast majority of lawyers work hard to try to protect society. And what we've done in the Puerto Rican Bar Association, understand that we still want to be a Puerto Rican Bar Association, not a Hispanic bar. We want to concentrate on Puerto Rican. And because we have the tremendous growth in Florida, it's literally an explosion. We are now nearly 1.1 million Puerto Ricans, about to overtake New York, as number that we have taken that as part of our social mission to advance the causes of Puerto Rico and of our members of the bar. So what are the biggest things we have done in the month? We initiated a moot court competition. And what does that mean? For those of you who don't know, it's a competition. We've invited schools. At this point, we've had over 17 different law schools from around the country participate in a simulated courtroom. always the issue was, what is some issue about Puerto Rico? Whether the 14th Amendment, how the Puerto Rico applies, whether the citizenship is in fact a valid citizenship. All the issues have been around Puerto Rico with the attempt, and what we're trying to accomplish is that people understand this problem, because most Americans don't know whether Puerto Ricans are citizens or not citizens, and don't know the history of how Puerto Rico got into the situation it's at. So the way to do it without being a political is to bring the law to them. So what we started a competition, and now we've got, like I said, 17 schools. Last year we had the competition in New York, and you see the pictures of what we had here. Then we had the competition in Miami. We had in Chicago, and the winners of the top 2 teams from Chicago, New York, and Florida met in Orlando for the finals. Our attempt by doing this was to bring nationally and create a core of people who would know, and not everyone who participated. In fact, most people, law students, were not Puerto Ricans. That was particularly important because we want people who have a vote in Congress who understand the problem that can actually affect and speak intelligently about the problem of Puerto Rico. So moot court is an important part that we have now collaborated. The Puerto Rican Bar of New York and Florida are working together on this. We're just started discussions about doing a national moot court competition in Washington, talking about the potentiality of, now that the United States Supreme Court has already told us that Puerto Rico has no sovereignty and there is no pacto bilateral, okay? Now we have to address the issue, is the United States holding a property in violation of its international contracts and treaties that it's done? That probably will be the issue. We're still in developing, but we're working together as members of the bar to bring this to the national conscience. The moot court finals, we created these awards that we give. That's as you may have heard, we have elected our first Puerto Rican to Congress. Of course, he's a New York Rican. And we awarded him this little award. That's the Fiambrera Award that we give annually, to that legislator that works hard and presents, representing the workers. And of course, lobbying for Puerto Rico. Now, a lot of pictures about me because I took these pictures from my library. So I wanted to tell you what large we do is lobby for Puerto Rico, all these issues. And what we do lobby both Republican and Democrat. I know in New York City, there's not much voice in the Republican Party, but in Florida, they dominate the entire landscape. If you don't speak to the Republican Party, you're not going to go anywhere. That is Congressman Bill Posey, whom I lobby personally on the issue of Puerto Rico and Promesa and all these things. And then he decided to give me an award for Floridian of the Year. And here we are in collaboration with the New York Bar in Puerto Rico. That's president of Puerto Rican Bar at the time, Anthony Bimbella, and of course, Betty Lugo and myself. And we were in Puerto Rico collaborating between all the three of those bars to see where can we go? What can we do together as lawyers and who have the ability to stop Congress if we have lawsuits, right? And of course, we participated in the Somos Conference in Puerto Rico, collaborating with the New York State Legislature, New York State Bar, and ourselves participating. Lobbying for Puerto Rico also includes speaking to Congressman Soto and Senator Bill Nelson on the Democratic side, and Senator Marco Rubio from the Republican side. So the Bar Association has been able to pull everybody in, Republican and Democrat, at the highest levels to make sure that they're being responsive to our needs. We got involved with Oscar Lopez Rivera. That's at my office is there, and there's, of course, everyone recognized Luis Gutierrez, showing that he can come to Orlando and he have support from the law firms and lawyers and the community as well. And we've been to Puerto Rico. And that's a picture with me with the justices of the Supreme Court in Puerto Rico, where we participated with the Colegio de Puerto Rico, where myself and Betty spoke at a forum on the Constitution of Puerto Rico. And that was recently a press conference I had on the issue of SCOTUS and the Supreme Court of Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. So everyone was asking for our opinion now. See, this is important. If you make enough noise and shake up the community, then they say, wait a minute, let's talk to these people before we make a move. And I think that that's the kind of activity that the Bar Association should have. Lobby also includes making sure that we have a political voice. And so among the things what we have done is we have sponsored debates, and that's a debate, the State Senate, that we sponsored at the law school where I teach, Barry University School of Law. And press conferences, stand up for Puerto Rico, you see citizens, you see, always the Bar Association is now, because we have taken and asserted ourselves into the conversation, we take a position of leadership within the community. Congressman Soto, and of course the second picture with the flag is a city hall with the mayor of Orlando. And so everyone has to recognize from a political point of view, están aquí. Y tenemos que poner atención, because they're demanding. We do seminars and symposiums. This has to be a seminar that we organize, and that has to be election law, because that's what I teach at the law school. And that also candidates for the supervisor election. And we were able to bring them to, we had Republicans and Democrats there, and it was very interesting seminar and clerk to court. We also participated in El Encuentro Nacional, which they had in Orlando, Florida. And I was in charge of a particular panel, and you can see the panelists, and you can see that room. That is in el Centro Borincano in Orlando. We have a huge building in Orlando, which we all are very proud of, and we have organized it now. Acacia of New York has taken over that building, which has been a blessing. And we thank, of course, the stars and the Lord for giving us the opportunity to maintain that building, because it was very, very costly and we couldn't from the community, but Acacia came in and saved us. And what? Bingo. They flew in people, and this was El Centro participating with many other groups, put it together, and in Orlando, we made a big clash in Orlando on this event. Then we have forums. Now there's a forum in that particular, you can see all the faces, including Juan, and Betsy. We had the members of the Chicago Bar Association, Juan Cartagena, myself, Betty from New York, and the gentleman on the left is from Puerto Rican Bar of Puerto Rico, from a colegio. And we had a forum. We brought all the members together, and all of us had, and you see on the left and to the right of the tables were our Puerto Rican state legislators, which we now have 6. From the time I was there, I was the only one in the entire state. Now we have 6. And we have a congressman. So you can see, eh? A lot of things have happened in Orlando in a couple of years. But these are the type of activities. From both parties. Republican Party. They were over here were the Democrats, and over there were the Republicans. We put them on the opposite sides, but it's okay. What they were doing was listening to presenters. We had the bar members, the bar presidents in the middle, Democrats on the right, Republicans on the left, and then the podium, we brought speakers to speak to them about Puerto Rico, about the situation, the economics of Puerto Rico, and the voting trends, etc. We had panelists that we brought in from as far as California, experts from universities to speak. And we have comedy. We have a Puerto Rican lawyer who's a comedian. Eli Castro, you may have heard of him. If not, look him up on his website. The guy is funny. He does a whole show on it's called Law and Disorder. He's really, really funny, and that allows us to get together, and that was my board of directors down there. And we do political salsa. All right, so we do moot court. We do a political salsa. It's an event. Now this is in Florida. We have these little. I guess they're called, we call them caucuses, but we invite all the candidates to our location. This happened to be at the law school where I teach. The second year we did it. It got so packed. I had to move it from the law school. It wasn't big enough, and I moved it into a Centro where we had over 400 people show up for that, political salsa. But you see, we have all the candidates. Those are the 3 Republicans there, and we had the Democrats on this side. And the public got up and was able to ask questions of our elected leaders. And of course, that does 2 things. What? It makes the leader understand there's a public out there I got to pay attention to. And then there's the public who feels these are my leaders. Let me talk to them. You see the political salsa, and we had, it was party. It's a party, como siempre, Because that's why political salsa, right? It's salsa, una fiesta, and so we had fun. We had pictures. Everyone, and we have Republicans with Democrats taking pictures. It's just funny. I have thousands of pictures, but Democrats standing right next to Republicans, talking to each other, which is the point. All right? It's not the question is whether you're Republican or Democrat. The question is, are you going to solve a problem? We have a problem, and we need both sides to be able to solve it. So that is what I was trying to accomplish, and what we have in fact accomplished, because our political salsa, if I get to that was inside the law school. No, I don't know where the pictures are. But now we've got a great reputation in Central Florida for doing a nonpartisan. Republicans are going, they say, oh, they're going to beat me up, or the Democrats, oh, they're going to go and beat me up. It's fair. Everyone gets a chance. And we do a poll, by the way. We take an actual poll, and people have to vote and help things. So everybody gets involved, and everybody feels well. Of course, we're also involved in the Puerto Rican parade. And you see this happened this year. That's the planning board inside my office. and then that's a picture of bird's eye view of the festival at the end of the parade, which is, just beginning to grow, and we just have 2 years under our belt, but we know that we feel that we will be able to grow, and of course, we intend to be bigger than the National Puerto Rican Parade. And then, of course, we do these things as forums as well. That was a one-on-one with the Central Florida delegation. Those guys sitting up there are the state representative and state senator from Central Florida. And we were able to call them to the room, to the chamber, and then present the 4 professors. All those professors are Puerto Ricans. All doctorate degrees, all right? And all of them presenting on the issue of Puerto Rico to our legislators, so they know, to the legislators from the county, they know who they're speaking to. That we're not just a bunch of people coming over. We have people with doctorate degrees. We have people who are doctors and lawyers and all these professional and businessmen, and they've got to pay attention to the needs of this community. And then, of course, the biggest thing we just accomplished just a couple of weeks ago. All of you are probably familiar with Somos Futuro. We don't have something like that until we now have it now. Because we just did in July 25th, April 25th and 26th, we did a Puerto Rico Day, which traditionally, I started that when I was in the legislature in 1999, which was just a way of getting people together to recognize the contributions of Puerto Ricans to the state of Florida. But this year, we really took the mission hard. We wanted not just to celebrate, we wanted to bring people from throughout the state. And we wanted to also reach out to our legislators. So we had persons with the expertise of Juan, we had different panels, and we had legislators come in. We lobbied, a lot of the groups went around lobbying to all the legislators in Tallahassee, and we had over 300 people show up in Tallahassee, which is a long haul because it's 4 hours from Orlando, 8 hours from Miami. And we had to fly them in or bus them in. We had buses coming in from all over the place. So it's the beginning of Somos, Florida, and you see the pic. These are the legislators, some of the legislators. There were many. There were about 17 legislators eventually showed up to our cocktail. They went to the party. Not too many came to the seminar. But they did come to the party, and we all had a great time. We had great entertainment, including Mr. Cartagena, who I now know is a great percussionist. Okay? And but the entertainment was terrific. As far as having the non-Hispanics understand our culture, that's the best way. They all came, they enjoyed our music, they enjoyed our culture, and they had a good time. Puerto Rico Day, Tallahassee, and of course the Fiambrero Award went to State Senator Victor Suárez. So we participated in the Somos of Puerto Rico. This is also something, community voices. We had the Pulse strategy in Orlando, and we were part of that as well. And that's it. So that's what we did in Orlando.
How do we tie all of this PowerPoint together? Is that it's all about collaboration, unification, in unity there's strength, en unidad está la fuerza. It's all about standing together and working together. And the movement of this is toward a National Bar Association. And we'll talk about whether that's important or not important to start tying the dots. Instead of having a mosaic, to have a solid bridge or a solid group of bar associations working together under one giant umbrella, but still maintaining the locality in order to push forward the agendas necessary in the various states that we sit in. So, with that understanding, and talking about the issue once again of the pipeline and the importance of leadership in bar associations and in institutions, I asked Ms. Plaza, what do you believe can be done with your organizations or organizations like yours that can promote more Puerto Rican leadership and more employment of attorneys of Puerto Rican heritage?
Yes. So, like I said earlier before, we really need to diversify, and we do want to use the opportunity to work with other bar associations, and then in our case, of course, me being Puerto Rican and being very passionate about the issues that go on in our community, it is important for me to bring others into the fold, and that is a big part of the reason why I'm sitting here, and I really want to build these coalitions, because it's very, very important for us to, have Puerto Ricans not only in leadership positions, but also able to influence, and the way these gentlemen have already spoken about legislation, judicial nominations, thinking about those things. And in our organization, we do that all the time. We have about 2,000 members nationwide, and we want to also use our national influence to also build an agenda that has something specifically to do with Puerto Rico and bring employment lawyers into it. There's many issues that are going to come really very soon. And there are issues here in the United States that are being, Puerto Ricans are being affected. Of course, in Florida, I've already been hearing a lot about teachers not getting having certifications and not being able to have the jobs that they are very much certified to do. Instead, they're getting janitor jobs and things that they really should not be doing. So that's one point that I've been hearing just today, which is something that I'm going to bring to the Florida affiliate of my organization to discuss how can our employment lawyers and the people that I work with influence what's happening in Florida, or how can we help the people, the Puerto Ricans in Florida, with something that could very seriously be a civil rights issue. Because for me, what we really try to do is think about how it can be a civil rights issue, because we are civil rights advocates. So we are looking for those issues that we can say, okay, we need to bring some equality into the situation, some equity. There are a lot of things going on that we need to really stand up for the people of Puerto Rico. And as we've said time and time again, here in the United States, we have that obligation to not only to the diaspora, but to the people in Puerto Rico who don't have the same voting rights in Congress as our congressmen do here from our perspective. So there's always that obligation, and there's always, from our perspective as a New York affiliate, and then going forward on a national perspective, we always think about resources. What are the resources that we could provide to other states that may not have those resources? So, us being able to think about who's on the bench, what are the nominations that we want to push forward? Are they going to be the kind of legislators or judicial nominations that are going to make a difference in our community? And how can we, as employment lawyers, try to push that and somehow coalesce with the issues that the Puerto Rican community is fighting for? So in my perspective, I'm always trying to engage people in that conversation and just let our civil rights attorneys understand what's really going on in our community here, and what's going on now in Puerto Rico.
Mr. Cartagena, having heard that issue that's concerning Florida, with the issues of employment, that they're creating like a subgroup or a subcategory of individuals who are well educated into putting them into like jobs that are not appropriate for their education. What would you say with PRLDEF or LatinoJustice? What is their position?
Obviously, the questions are raised whenever you have incredibly well-educated population of workers like they are in Puerto Rico coming to the Diaspora. We all know how excellent the University of Puerto Rico system is in Puerto Rico, and why it's challenged now would be a major loss for a major institution in the island. What you're raising, Carmen, is the mismatch between.
They have to say louder. They want your
Sorry.
voice.
What I was saying is what we're dealing with is the mismatch between certification to work in a particular state and educational attainment, right? Because a lot of the professions that exist in various states are regulated in various ways, and therefore, in order to work in a particular profession, you have to have either some kind of certification, some kind of passage of some kind of exam, perhaps, or some kind of good moral character requirement. All these things exist for one very simple reason, is to protect the number and limit the number of people in that profession for that particular state. It's a very jealously guarded group of workers, and they're trying to make it not so easy to have other people from other jurisdictions just plop in and take over those jobs. Bar associations bar admissions in states do that all the time, right? They don't want to make it too easy for anybody from a particular state to just go in there and start working in their state, because they take work away from the people of that particular state. I come from New Jersey. I'm admitted to both New Jersey and New York. New Jersey is notorious for being jealous about who can practice in Jersey, because it's sandwiched between two major markets, Philadelphia and New York City. So when you look at it that way, it shouldn't surprise you that in order to start working in a profession that you've been working at in Puerto Rico, if you move to Texas, you may have to jump over hoops in certifications to actually finally get the license necessary to work in Texas, even though you have the education. And then lastly is the language issue, el difícil. I have no idea, literally have no idea, because I haven't talked to enough people learning about what their experiences are from various professions to find out what exactly are some other potential barriers to the kind of work that we know they can do. So it's a question of how you address the barriers that are easier to address, and how you try to question whether or not all the requirements for exercise a particular profession need to happen across the board.
Switching gears a little bit and understanding that Puerto Rico faces a $70 billion debt crisis, a poverty rate 3 times. Oh, louder?
Louder, yes.
Wow.
If you're on board.
Okay. As Puerto Rico faces a $70 billion debt crisis, a poverty rate 3 times that of the United States borderline insolvent public health care and retirement systems, and a subsequent mass exiting, what is, if anything, can the Diaspora Puerto Rican attorney do to assist in this crisis? Mr. Suarez.
Well, I think that I have to say that plainly. Puerto Rico has no advocates, partly because the Popular Democratic Party of Puerto Rico has chosen to take the position that they don't need advocates, that it's going to happen by miracles. The result of the fact that they had nobody watching the bankruptcy law when they excluded Puerto Rico from Chapter 9 is an indication of the failure of that kind of thinking. So what we have to do here is be the advocates for Puerto Rico, because Puerto Rico doesn't have a voice. So those of us here, we have affect congressmen, we affect our senators, and that's what we have to do. We have to be the voice of Puerto Rico, and I think we can bring lawsuits if it's appropriate, participate in amicus briefs, as we have in fact done in other situations, and be a voice.
Mr. Cartagena, would you like to add to that? Since you, in fact, along PRLDEF and the Puerto Rican Bar Association of New York, all joined in amicus briefs
Sure.
with Valle Sanchez and the Juana and others.
Sure. If the question is what can Puerto Rican lawyers do, well, we better start learning a lot more about international human rights law, because we're not going to, there is no magic lawsuit that's going to stop colonialism in the U.S. District Court. Let's be very clear. Just like there's no magic lawsuit to stop capitalism, there's no magic lawsuit that's going to stop colonialism. Will be stopped at every way, every turn. And you heard already there has been 2 recent Supreme Court cases which basically underscore the plenary authority of Congress under the Constitution to dictate what happens in Puerto Rico. So we need to start looking for other avenues, and that is either going to be a political avenue of changing the will of Congress on Puerto Rico, or if it's going to be a litigation avenue, it won't be in the federal district court. It's going to be some other forum, and the only ones that might exist that might possibly be interested and might have possibly have the jurisdiction will be international forums. So we should learn a lot more about international human rights.
Now, Ms. Plaza, your interest earlier in an outside discussion, outside of this room, you were talking about the issue of health care and the issue of employment in that area and the effects of what's going on because of the deficit or the debt crisis that we have. Do you have a further opinion, or would you like to share your opinions with this group?
Well, as you know, the healthcare issue that Puerto Rico is facing is a very serious situation where there's the funding for Medicaid and a lot of other things, a lot of public services. It's not equitable to what we expect. And even some states as little as Mississippi will receive funding, a lot more funding than Puerto Rico. And when you look at the ratio of the people and the people who depend on Medicaid and Medicare, those issues are really starting to become front and center for Puerto Ricans on a national level, just because we want the parity. And I think that if we don't think about how we can gain some parity in terms of funding for Puerto Rico, the healthcare crisis it's already happening. Doctors are leaving. They're so I'm sure you guys all heard about hospitals being closed and also lights being turned out in hospitals and things like that. They're all related, but at the same time, I have to say that what I believe is going to be somewhat what I want my plight to be is the route that Juan mentioned first, which is advocacy with our congressmen here in the United States. I think that is an avenue that my association in particular could be helpful with, and I think that that's something that everyone in this room could feel empowered to help the Puerto Ricans on the island, just by making sure that all these issues that are not equitable are being brought to your legislators and tell them we are paying attention to this, we care about what's happening, and we want some justice. We're American citizens, and there should be a conscience to helping the people of Puerto Rico. That I would like that to be part of our entire consciousness, and that's just personal also.
Now, just to add a little bit more to the discussion, first I'd like to address that we have part of the pipeline of attorneys. We have Judge Padron in the audience, who's been one of the mentors to the pipeline community of Puerto Rican attorneys and other attorneys in our judicial system. We have Luis Davilla, who's from Puerto Rico and the Commonwealth, who's the Deputy Director. From the governor's office. We have Nesa Asina, who is the immediate past president of this region of the HNBA, Hispanic National Bar Association. And we also have the immediate past president of the Puerto Rican Bar of New York. Now, just Gonzalez. Oh, right. From New Jersey. From New Jersey, right. Attorneys from New Jersey there. We're going to be opening movement of the Puerto Rican community. We're going to be establishing a Puerto Rican Bar Association in New Jersey. So the national is very right, and we hope to establish it. We actually have it incorporated in Washington and hope to house it along with the Puerto Rican Federal Affairs. Now, Mr. Davida, who's an attorney, could you add to that issue, or would you like to respond a little bit on the issue of the healthcare crisis in Puerto Rico? You can stand.
Yeah. Well, I am an attorney. I've been a member of the Puerto Rican Bar for 6 years now. When, first of all, clerked for a judge in Puerto Rico, then went into private practice, then came back to public service because I'm passionate about it. When I saw that Donald Trump was elected as president, I thought to myself, what's going to happen in Puerto Rico in the next 4 years, right? We have Republican control Congress at the moment. White House is also Republican controlled. I thought to myself, what can we do, okay? In terms of healthcare, we are severely underfunded compared to other states. The only reason we've been able to survive up to this point was because under the ACA, the Affordable Care Act in 2009, we got a block grant of $6.2 billion that expired at the end of this year. When those funds end, we revert back to the pre-ACA reality, which caps us at around $350 million a year. Our healthcare system takes almost $2 billion a year. So that's a huge shortfall. We've been fighting to get funds. I know you've heard that recently we got $296 million in the spending package. Just so you get a sense of how we got there, 2 months ago, the majority in Congress said that there was no way that Puerto Rico would get money in the spending package. There was 0% possibility of that happening, and we got it done. Not the figure that we wanted, but it was something, right? Unfortunately, that it's $300 million. We need $300 million more just to take this to June 2018, right? So we're thinking of patches. We need a long-term fix. We really need it. And we had a big opportunity of doing that in 2009 with the Affordable Care Act, and we weren't able to get Puerto Rico in. We need to do that in the future. So the next step is the S-chip bill. Yesterday, it was said in the plenary that is based on a children's healthcare program. That's coming in September. So if we can get $300 million in that bill, that would take us to June 2018. But now there's discussions of the Senate repeal and replace bill. I'm not a fan of repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. God knows that is going to do a lot of damage to this country. But unfortunately, in terms of Puerto Rico, it really doesn't affect because we weren't a part of the ACA to begin with. So, what can we do? What can we do? We're starting to push, trying to include some language within at least the Senate bill. Try to see if we can get the cap that we have right now that limits us severely. Try to raise that to a major amount. Let's say 800, 900. I don't know. Let's say we raise it to 900. That's $600 million a year that Puerto Rico would have more than it has today. That could help for pensions. That could help for the employment benefits that are being taken off. So this is a fight that we are taking to Congress. And like I said yesterday, we're in office. We operate with 12 people. We need help. We need to organize. We need to unite. I'm convinced that there's a lot more that unites us than separates us. Everyone wants a better healthcare system for Puerto Rico. And we've been using data that supports our push, and Republicans are actually buying it, and it's something that goes like this. A patient in Puerto Rico, a Medicaid patient that receives medical services in Puerto Rico, when they move to the United States to receive those same services, it costs 3 times as more to receive those services in the States than in Puerto Rico. So in the long run, in the back end, if Republicans are going with this mentality that we need to cut spending, we need to cut the deficit, by not providing the adequate funds for Puerto Rico, you're really actually tripling the national debt in that sense. So, if you want to be, we want to cut government spending, you need to address and tackle the Puerto Rico issue in the forefront. And there are other issues that are coming in Congress. Everybody knows that they're going to reform the whole tax system. One of the models is a border adjustability tax. Pretty much it draws a line between the United States and the rest of the world. being whatever gets produced in the United States is domestic. Outside that line, it's foreign. Where is Puerto Rico going to be located within that bill? We're going to be domestic, or we're going to be foreign? That has huge implications for the Puerto Rican economy. And this is happening, and I don't see it in the news, I don't see it anywhere, and we need to work, we really need to pay attention to the big game which is being played right now in Congress. And like Tony Suárez said, we have a voice, but we have no vote. All we have is the political pressure that we can do in our districts, in our counties, with our own representatives in Congress, so that we're heard, you know, and that we could actually make a difference if we unite under this message. We also have an infrastructure package that the president is saying that he's coming out with $1 trillion infrastructure package. Go to Puerto Rico, go see the roads, go see the buildings. We need that. We need to participate within that. So how is that going to happen? We need to lobby. We need to organize. We need to get together, and it has to, you know, transcend the local offices in the districts. We need to go to Washington, and I'll be the first to open the doors of our offices. It's actually your office, right? So you know, like I said, I'm in the best. Tengo la mejor intención de recibirlos a todos. I really wanna keep fighting, wanna keep working, and that's the reason why I came here. I understand that el poder que tienen ustedes es algo que nadie lo va a poder superar. No hay un cabildero que pueda hacer eso. No hay dinero que pueda comprar el apoyo de ustedes y la fuerza que ustedes tienen. Así que nada, gracias por el.
Diaspora, it's up to the diaspora here in the United States to start voting and having your voices heard so that that voice could be resounding over on the island of Puerto Rico, as you heard, Mr. Villa. So when we're talking about the issues of infrastructure, products, and what have you, we were commemorating this year, in March, the 100th anniversary of the Jones Act, a 1917 law that granted citizenship to Puerto Rico people, Puerto Ricans born on the island. The Jones Act, which granted that citizenship or that American citizenship. But along with that granting, it requires that Puerto Ricans buy goods solely from American ships maintained by American crews, which are costing the Puerto Ricans a rise up in their products and hurts their businesses. Now, as attorneys, we can speak on many levels because we are the voice for the voiceless. We speak for those who cannot speak. We as Puerto Ricans get it, and we help everyone because we're so inclusive. We love everybody. But now, what is it as attorneys with licenses here in the United States to speak up or step aside? What is it that you believe as sitting here as the president of a bar association, great. As the head of the PRLDEF, great. As the head of your employment organization, great. But what is it that we could do as a group? Mr. Cartagena.
Wow. Coño.
You want to hold the thought?
Say that. Oh.
Whoa. If I had the answer to that question, we could cut this conference short right now, right? Go home and work on it. Start working instead of talking.
The thesis.
All right? The fact of the matter is, I think we laid it out, and the gentleman already laid it out before when we talk about the healthcare crisis. We need to literally take over, pressure, shame every one of the elected officials who doesn't speak and do something in favor of Puerto Rico. Vote out of office the ones who are on the fence or definitely against us, and include more people who are willing to take a stand for Puerto Rico in Congress and everywhere else. We need to shame the money transfers and the people who are enriching themselves off the current fiscal crisis in Puerto Rico. We need to shame all these entities in a way that it makes it uncomfortable for these corporations to continue to make money off of Puerto Rico in its economic times. So we need to do a lot of things, but it's not just lawyers. So while lawyers have the capacity to work in courts, they might be the only ones who are allowed to work in courts because of the licensure. This is lawyers and everyone else. This is everyone else actually recognizing our role as putting pressure on political representatives to make sure that our voices get heard.
And I would also like to add that one thing that we can do also is really pay attention to any civil rights violations that is occurring now with the laws that are being enacted, and even within some of what's included in Promesa. And just really pay attention to make sure, from my perspective, I've been recently hearing that there's been 80 years of labor laws and labor law organizing that's sort of just going down the drain. Or, unions and people not getting paid what they're supposed to be paid. The discussion of lowering minimum wage for the younger, generation. All these civil rights. These are also civil rights issues that we can be paying attention to, and we can raise these issues amongst ourselves, amongst our community, and again, to your representatives, because those are the people that have to fight for the Puerto Ricans on another level. So I do believe that we have to really pay attention to these things and make sure that that we're not just ignoring that, because the people of Puerto Rico have a right to the same things that we have the rights to here in the United States.
Let me just add, I think that we're talking to the choir. You people here because you care.
Right.
There are a million Puerto Ricans out there and not here. So the reason, you're the choir, all right? You've got to go out there and bring other people into it and get them involved. So everything that Juan has said, it's certainly, but it's you. You guys got to bring somebody else in here so they get educated.
So listen, look at your question. The legal system does not work without participation of everyone, okay? The legal system works when you go out there and when you go out and you vote, and because there were words here, it says you have to vote out. So you first got to vote out people. We need judges. You go to your polling booth, and you find, oh, fulana, fulano, oh, I vote for them only. We got to start putting our voices and our clicks to work. Click and send. Click and send. Scan, scan. So that's all about, that's your voice, okay? That's almost like a dance. Click, click, scan, okay? So that's what we have here going on. That's part of our voice. We have a district attorney in Brooklyn, the first to be Puerto Rican or Latino, whatever, district attorney is now running in Brooklyn. We need to make that noise. Why? Because he's going to be, right now he's very progressive. He's doing the right things. He's assisting and he's understanding. He's the DA del Pueblo. So we have so many different things that we have to do. We need to have people to administer the justice, to provide the justice and speak out for you, and that's what the legal system is about. We have to show a level of shame. That was the word, shame. We have to vote out. We have to stand up. We have to put our money to work. If you don't listen, my money goes somewhere else. Got it? If you don't hear me, your store doesn't want me, my money's better spent somewhere else. If you're not hiring Latinos, Puerto Ricans in your place, my money goes somewhere else. Because you know what? I could do a lot with my money. I don't need to spend it with you. If it's, so we can brand ourselves because we have the economic power. We have to pay attention. I heard that. We have to pay attention. And we have to create that pipeline. That is so important when you're looking at our legal system. We can't work alone. We can't do anything without a client. We can't do anything unless I hear you. We cannot promote people in legislative possibilities because if we're deaf, it's because no one has spoken to us. So this is your job as the audience at large, including whether you're lawyers, whether you're not lawyers, whether you're teachers, whatever it is, there's an audience at large. It's your responsibility. So with that, I see that there are a lot of hands moving. Let's talk about our responsibility.
I think it would be I think of all this.
Stand up and
information-
identify yourself, please.
My name is Erica Gonzalez. I don't really want to stand up for it.
Okay.
I think it would be, like, all of this information is like super valuable, and I think that people want to do something and they may not have clarity of the details of specific issues, and there's a lot of good stuff that's circulated via social media, and necessarily doesn't have a call to action, but what I want to suggest, and I will volunteer to be a part of this effort, or maybe it's in motion, is that there's some sort of like clearinghouse that speaks to exactly what you laid out. If Fulano in such and such district is against labor rights and issues some weird statement about Puerto Ricans, then there's an alert system, they can see a report card kind of thing. Because I know when I see something on social media, like when that, there was an official who had referred to Michelle Obama as a gorilla, and somebody posted the number that you could call and who you could register a complaint. Everybody, because they had that information, was able to flood those lines. So we need to stir our community to action in a very organized way by using technology to get them that information, make sure they can see who's doing what, who's saying what, and that if we're going to do an economic block in some district or some neighborhood or some city, then that we all have the information all on the same page and we're doing it at the same time, and those folks can see the impact.
She had a question, and then.
Can I answer that for a second?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that you're in one of the greatest places for that type of information. I am a big time advocate of the Center for Puerto Rican Studies. This is like my second home. I do immense volunteerism even for this because of the fact that I think that they are really one of the most dependable resources on anything Puerto Rican that you can think of. So I would definitely invite you to also check out the website on the Nation Builder, because they do have a lot of programs and they do have Puerto Rican ambassadors and things of that. There are a lot of tools within the Centro website that really lay out a lot of resources. And I do like what you said about, having that information about, if someone is speaking, ill about, a Puerto Rican legislator, things like that. And I think that that's something that I'm willing to speak for you. And if you, in our next session about what can Centro do, maybe that's something that that you can also help facilitate within the structure that they have, because they have so much valuable information there. I invite all of you to really look at all of the information in Centro's website. They have tons, highlights.
I don't know how politically being in the kind of nonprofit, like that may be a separate endeavor, but I'm talking about like let's get with it and let's do what political campaigns do. I get a text, we're all getting a text about the same things, and we act. So just really rapid response, organized.
So maybe you can, later on, you share your information with me, and then I'll circulate it among my groups. Any other questions?
Yeah.
You have a question?
Yes, hi. I was me first.
Yeah. No, you. Because I don't know your name.
So, basically, I don't have a question, I have a feedback, some advice. So since I can't do it, because obviously I don't have the power of, politics, I can't get into office, I wish I could. Because I would be there, I would get things done, everything would be better. So basically, the problem starts, the most important thing right now is getting Puerto Rico out of debt. Because talking about it, you gotta be about it. You gotta wipe everything clean and get the right people in office that care about Puerto Rico, okay? And stop spending unnecessary money on things that people take advantage and leech off the government. Like they do it here in the city. A lot of people on drugs, getting food stamps. They sell their food stamps to get high. A lot of teen pregnancies. These young girls have no education, getting food stamps to wait. So it's like they're getting, rewarded for doing something. That's not the government's job to provide medical service for babies that's not their children. You understand? This is why Puerto Rico's probably in debt. They're probably having the same problem over there. With food stamps, these girls get with food stamps and medical services, and it needs to stop because that's unnecessary spending. Because 15 and 16-year-old girls should not be getting pregnant.
Right. So, there are certain social issues that go along with that, but I think we have another question. Yes.
Like they spend
One second, disrespectful, next person.
My name is Daisy. This question is for Dr. Suárez?
Yes, okay.
I'm a little confused, so please give me some point of clarification when you mentioned earlier something about the Constitution that says that property, Puerto Rico's a property, because Puerto Rico's a colony.
Right.
Yes.
It's been like that for a long time.
Well,
And so, well, it's been like that since 1898. So when you talk about international law,
Right.
and what do we, see, in order to educate or inform a lot of our community,
Right.
I think for me, I would need to know more about what this is all about.
Surely.
Because
Surely.
I've heard it since I was a kid.
Right. Well,
I saw
the United
territorial-
States,
I saw territorial,
right.
years ago, I read a territorial
Clause.
booklet, Constitution, that talked about even if Puerto Rico one day voted for independence,
Right.
it would be Congress who would make the final decision.
Right.
Is that all part of this territorial?
It is all part of this, exactly, okay? Just to be, so you understand the issues, right? Puerto Rico, the issue was always brought by Cuba. They go to the International Committee and the United Nations and want to bring in the issue of Puerto Rico being a colony. Of course, Puerto Rico has been saying in the United States, they say, oh, Puerto Rico is not a colony. It has sovereignty. And the United States signed a treaty with the United Nations that they would not maintain anybody in the status of not having the ability to vote for themselves. So they've been telling the world, and the Puerto Rico through the Populares have been telling the world that Puerto Rico has sovereignty and has self-determination. Well, now the United States Supreme Court had clarified that issue. That Puerto Rico is territory. We can do whatever we want with Puerto Rico. Now that that's clear, now we can move on. So the question is, now that that's clear under the United States law, how can the United States State Department go before the United Nations and say Puerto Rico is no longer a colony, it's outside? So I think that's the issue to be determined. I don't say.
in 1950, President Roosevelt did make a declaration before the United Nations that said that Puerto Rico was not a colony, that it was a sovereign. A judge?
Yeah. And I was going to say, I don't think it's new. The United States Supreme Court has ruled that way before. Back 30, 40 years ago, there was a declaration. We're a part of, but we don't belong to the United States. The international arena has not accepted Puerto Rico as a free sovereign state going back to the 60s. The majority of the nations have made declarations that they want the decolonization of Puerto Rico. So the recent Supreme Court decisions added nothing but reconfirming that colonial relationship. To me, the problem is that in Puerto Rico, the people are divided. They are extremely divided. And if you put any of the options up, the majority of the rest of the people are opposed to that. The American people, first of all, the majority of the American people don't even know what Puerto Rico is, don't even know whether we're citizens or not, and unfortunately, don't even care.
Yeah.
And they themselves are divided by the particular economic or other interests, so they have no clarity what to do with Puerto Rico, and we have. In that crisis, unfortunately, we're stuck with what little things can we do to cover up those holes in the dike that's exploding, and maybe that's the extent of it until somewhere, somehow, clarity comes to the table.
Yeah, I think that, but just to reply is that, just like we were saying, shaming the politicians, we have to shame the government into acknowledging on an international platform where we're at.
Now, I've had a few people.
She tried to say something a long time ago.
Okay.
From the very beginning.
No, please,
And
have.
I was chastised for raising my
No,
hand.
come along, I'm so sorry.
Respectful, and I was very respectful.
No, thank you very much.
But I've lived long enough, and this is the second time that there's a brain drain due to vulture funds going into Puerto Rico and inundating Puerto Rico with worthless bonds. I want to know, how are you going to deal with that situation going forward And what kind of lobbyists do you have to be able to voice this? Because they're making it look like they stole the money and they haven't paid any of their debts. That's not the case. The vulture funds have inundated Puerto Rico for the second time in my life. And we don't have any lobbyists or anyone out there that I have heard in the media in any way, shape, or form bringing this forward. I was even in an airplane at the time this was going on, with all this commotion going on in the airplane, and I don't know. Everybody's missing that point. So a lot of the debt that Puerto Rico has is happened upon because of vulture funds and worthless bonds. Not only that, Puerto Rico has the highest representation of military service men and women that have participated, and I don't hear that either. Okay? So what I want to know is what kind of lobbying power does your organization have? Because all of this conjecture is not going to bring forward the problems that have faced Puerto Rico for the second time. And they have shamed us.
I'm going to kick that over to Mr. Darida, if you respond to that, you think? Coming from Puerto Rico and the
All right. I want to try to feel
Just
this
say
one.
one thing, audit.
No, we can talk. You know, actually, I'll even actually help you out a little bit. During the oral arguments, right, on the debt crisis case that came before the United States Supreme Court, Justice, that's how important it is to have our pipeline and our representatives. Justice Sotomayor did actually make a comment about the issue of vulture funds. Okay? That they were vulture funds, and then that they were leaving, and they had a whole discussion on that. I invite you to read that online, listen to the tapes on that.
Yeah. One thing is to keep an eye on
Yes.
on the court, the case.
The audit.
Now, we've got 3 cases,
The
right?
audit.
Everyone's talking about the audit of the debt, and that the debt needs to be audited. It has to be audited, of course, but it has to be done in a fashion that provides legitimacy to that process, right? So it has to be done by the court. A couple of weeks ago, I was in a conference back in Washington, D.C., where Antonio Weiss was person who worked at Treasury and was pretty much the architect of Promesa, and especially the Title III provision. He stated that they put 2 phrases in the law that needs to be taken particular importance to, and that's lawful debt and lawful liens. And that phrase lawful is very important because that's where the audit of the debt is going to come up in the court, right? When one of the parties raises their hand and says, listen, that debt is illegal, or was, the bond was shady or something, that is going to open the door for the judge to say an audit needs to be performed of that debt. And that's where, vulture funds will come in and try to say no and fight that. Especially the last one, the one in 2014, everybody knew Puerto Rico was broke. It was a matter of time. So, anyone would have not invested in that but vulture funds. So there's some issues there that you're talking about what we can do. Keep an eye on what's happening on the court, on the case that just started. So it's something that I hear you. The debt needs.
Media's not voicing it. And what they're voicing is that Puerto Ricans don't pay their debt, and they owe this, but they're not voicing the Puerto Ricans that are coming back to the media and telling them, we have a lot of vulture debt here, we have a lot of insolvency from many different businesses that flooded the island, and this is the kind of media that we need to have out there so that things can get turned around, because we hear this during the funds when they failed in 2008, they all were funded, and they shouldn't have been, because that was American money, okay? And now that this is happening here, and all they did was raise a lot of publicity. Without the lobbying, without the publicity, without calling them out, it's not going to help us. We're going to be here forever. And we can all conjecture and do whatever we want, but unless we get out there and your organization has the power to do it, to get it in the media on a constant basis.
I hear you, and I can totally agree with you on that. I have read articles that say and that state what the vulture funds have done in Puerto Rico. I have read it. I'm sure many of you have also read that.
But she has a point there. There really hasn't been a great discussion, whether it's on the American media or on the Spanish media concerning that issue.
Yes.
So the thing is, we don't have enough people in the media, and that's another discussion, to really talk about it. That's why we have to have that pipeline, whether it's legal or whatever, we have to have it on top. Did you have a question?
Why don't we use social media then?
Well, that's what we were talking about there. We should, yes, just want to, yeah, 'cause they're throwing us out, so.
Yeah, that's what that means.
Just let her, no, they're doing it, yeah. I know she's doing it. There's another group coming in. Oh, there's another group coming in here. Yes, please.
The Puerto Rican people, the nation of Puerto Rico, should not be burdened and suffer the consequences of poor management, poor administration, vulture funds, poor investors and speculators who came to the island and were selling those bonds to the American public here. Those are the people now that are looking to really squeeze that population of what remains to them. But that burden that we're assuming in saying, oh, we have to really come up, audit the debt and come up with a real meaning, the underlying assumption, and I propose this to you, is that the burden should not be placed on the Puerto Rican population because it's the result of malfeasance or just pure speculation and just investors who took investment firms that were exploiting the American population here and also the Puerto Rican population there to invest in these bonds, knowing at one point that they were pure junk. And that burden, that underlying assumption has to be exploded, that we have to really experience all the austerity measures and all the people, the schools have to be closed, the hospitals have to be shut down. It's nonsense.
They recommended that the Puerto Rican, I'm very sure they didn't do the research, because they're supposed to look at the books, and make sure that it's something sound, and they didn't.
Okay, listen, let me thank this panel before you leave. Let us get started.